Gunther von Kluger was one of the most important and complex German field marshals of the Second World War. His life reflects both the strengths and weaknesses of the traditional German officer class, as well as the moral and political pressures faced by senior commanders under Adolf Hitler. Von Kluger was intelligent, hardworking, and often capable at the operational level, but he was also cautious, physically strained by illness, and trapped between loyalty to his oath and growing doubts about the Nazi regime. His career rose rapidly during Germany's early victories and ended in tragedy as the war turned decisively against Germany. Von Kluger was born on October 30, 1882, in Posen, then part of the German Empire. He came from a Prussian military family, and like many men of his background, he was shaped from an early age by discipline, duty, and respect for hierarchy. He entered the Prussian army as a cadet and was commissioned as an officer shortly before the First World War. During that conflict, he served primarily as a staff officer rather than a frontline commander. This experience suited his analytical mind and helped him develop a reputation for careful planning and attention to detail. He performed well enough to remain in the drastically reduced post-war army, the Reichswehr, which was limited by the Treaty of Versailles. In the interwar years, von Kluger built a solid professional reputation. He was not a political officer and showed little interest in ideology. His focus was on military organization, training, and theory. Like many senior officers, he welcomed the expansion of the armed forces after Hitler came to power, seeing it as a restoration of German strength rather than a political revolution. By the late 1930s, von Kluger had risen to the rank of general and was entrusted with increasingly important commands. His promotion was based on competence and reliability rather than personal closeness to Hitler. When the Second World War began in 1939, von Kluger commanded a corps during the invasion of Poland. The campaign was short and decisive, and although his role was not central, he gained valuable experience in modern mobile warfare. He played a larger part in the 1940 campaign in the West, commanding 4th Army during the invasion of France. This operation was one of Germany's greatest military successes, and von Kluger's army helped drive deep into French territory, contributing to the collapse of Allied resistance. His performance earned him praise and increased Hitler's confidence in him. Following the defeat of France, von Kluger remained in a senior command position and was later assigned to the Eastern Front for the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941. This campaign would define his legacy more than any other. He was given command of 4th Army within Army Group Center, the main force driving toward Moscow. During the early months of the invasion, his troops advanced rapidly, encircling and destroying large Soviet formations. These victories reflected the overall strength of the German attack, but also masked the growing logistical and strategic problems that would soon emerge. As the advance continued, von Kluger began to show both his strengths and limitations. He was capable of organizing large formations and managing complex operations, but he was also cautious and sometimes hesitant to take risks without clear support. He frequently clashed with Hitler over strategic decisions, especially regarding whether to push forward or consolidate positions. Unlike some generals who openly defied Hitler, von Kluger usually tried to balance obedience with subtle resistance. This approach allowed him to remain in command, but limited his ability to challenge disastrous decisions. In late 1941, as the German advance on Moscow stalled and winter set in, von Kluger's army suffered heavy losses. The Red Army launched counteroffensives that forced German units into retreat. Von Kluger struggled to maintain cohesion among exhausted troops while dealing with Hitler's rigid orders forbidding withdrawal. His health began to deteriorate under the strain, and he suffered from recurring illnesses that affected his ability to command effectively. Nevertheless, he remained at his post and continued to serve as one of the most senior commanders on the Eastern Front. In 1942, von Kluger was promoted to Field Marshal and given command of Army Group Center. This was both an honor and a burden. Army Group Center held a long and vulnerable section of the front, facing constant Soviet pressure. Von Kluger understood that Germany no longer had the strength to win a decisive victory in the East, and he increasingly focused on defensive operations. He attempted to improve fortifications and reduce exposed positions, but Hitler often rejected these plans, insisting on holding ground at all costs. One of the most controversial episodes of von Kluger's command was his handling of partisan warfare and security operations behind the front. Like many German commanders, he operated within a system that carried out brutal reprisals and mass violence against civilians. While he was not known as an ideological fanatic, he did little to stop these actions and bears responsibility as a senior leader for the conduct of his forces. This aspect of his career reflects the moral compromises made by many professional officers who chose to serve the regime despite its crimes. By 1943, the balance of power on the Eastern Front had clearly shifted. After the German defeat at Stalingrad and the failure of the Kursk offensive, von Kluger faced a relentless Soviet advance. He continued to argue for flexible defense and withdrawals to shorten the front, but Hitler's interference grew worse. Von Kluger's relationship with Hitler became increasingly strained, though he remained outwardly loyal. At the same time, he came into contact with officers involved in resistance circles who were considering the removal of Hitler. While von Kluger never committed himself fully to a plot, he was aware of the growing opposition and did not actively report it. In mid-1944, von Kluger was transferred to the Western Front and appointed Commander-in-Chief West, replacing Gerd von Rundstedt after the Allied invasion of Normandy. This was an extremely difficult assignment. German forces in France were outnumbered, outgunned, and under constant air attack. Von Kluger inherited a chaotic situation and had little freedom to act. He supported efforts by Erwin Rommel to pull armored units back from the coast and prepare a more mobile defense, but Hitler again refused to allow significant withdrawals. The situation worsened after the failed assassination attempt against Hitler on July 20, 1944. Von Kluger was suspected by some Nazi leaders of having sympathies with the conspirators, though there was no clear proof that he had participated. His position became precarious as trust between him and the regime collapsed. Militarily, the Western Front was nearing disaster, with German forces in Normandy at risk of encirclement. Von Kluger attempted to organize a breakout, but delays and conflicting orders made success impossible. In August 1944, von Kluger was relieved of his command and ordered to return to Germany. He understood that this likely meant arrest, interrogation, and possibly execution. Facing this prospect, and exhausted by years of pressure, illness, and moral conflict, von Kluger chose to take his own life on August 18, 1944. He left a letter expressing loyalty to Germany, but also despair over the course of the war. His death marked the end of a long and troubled career. Today, von Kluge is often remembered as a symbol of the traditional German officer caught between professionalism and complicity. He did not possess the fanaticism of some Nazi commanders, nor did he show the courage of those who openly resisted. His life illustrates how obedience, ambition, and fear can entangle individuals in systems they no longer believe in. As such, his biography offers insight not only into military history, but also into the human cost of authoritarian rule and total war.